Why don't we start off so people get to know you, the notorious Liam Sketcher.
Notorious. Yeah.
Well, in some places probably.
I'll not go back there then.
Yeah. Why don't you just give the people your background, and particularly kind of as it relates to this whole transitioning from juniors to college/professional or senior team?
Yeah. So like a lot of people, my first contact with coaching was with young players. So the junior teams at the club that I played in and the school that I went to. So usually around 15 years old was roughly the starting point. From there, I started coaching a state under 15 team and also was an assistant with our older age groups, under 17, under 19, under 21, and worked in that area, a lot of school volleyball, work and coaching club juniors still. From there, progressed to work with the Australian National Youth and Junior programs. So that ended up with me working at the National Training Centre full-time to be there with our full-time athletes. I don't want to say elite athletes, but our full-time trainers, because they may be in an elite training environment, but there are different points on the journey. Right. From there, I moved to Europe, where I was coaching in Denmark, coaching a club team in the league, but also coaching the club juniors and a regional training centre. So a talent centre is the phrase that they use there. Then I moved to Switzerland, similar setup, coaching the league team in Lucerne and coaching, they call it talent school in Switzerland, actually, these guys. And it's a slightly different system there, and we can touch on this in a bit. Throughout this period, I worked with under 23s for the Australian under 23 team and the Australian senior team. I was an assistant coach with the senior men's team. I was more or less the head coach of the National B team, which is a step between our under 23s and our senior team. At sort of every point on the journey. And in the Netherlands, I've been doing bits and pieces with the National Training Centre here, where they have talent teams who train full-time and compete in the league, but are mostly made up of the national youth and junior players. So every point along the journey, I've sort of worked at the top available adult level, but also working with juniors as well, and usually trying to find a way for those two things to fit with one another.
Right. When you and I met, it was Mark's first Aussie camp in Poland, and at that time you were getting ready to, was it the B team or was it the U23s?
That would have been later. 23s, yeah.
Okay. All right, because I remember you were talking about the plans for the tournament that was coming up, I think, at the end of the summer, something along those lines.
We were the first part of the training camp. We were in Iran for that tournament.
Okay.
So we came back a week or so into camp. Yeah.
All right. Yeah. For watchers, as we record this, Liam is in a little bit of mourning period or shock period because his now former professional team unexpectedly won the cup championship in Switzerland without him. It was supposed to take place back in the spring, right? I mean, you would have been coaching them had they played on schedule.
Yeah, it was the replacement for the cup final. We managed to make a cup final, the first chance in the club's history to win anything. It would have been great to be a part of it. I'm really happy for the guys on the team and for the club. I'm grateful for the opportunity they gave me. It just sucks that I couldn't be there to stand on the sideline.
Were you able to watch it?
Yeah, I was able to watch most of it.
Okay.
It's there's a really good group of people there, and they deserve the success. Like, they're trying to do things the right way, and people who aren't there just for glory, but because they want to work hard and get better.
Right. Yeah, exactly. All right. So as I said, kind of at the top, the subject here is that transition from being a juniors level player to being a senior player, however you want to define that in your particular system. In the States, that generally means going to college. Elsewhere, it'll mean either going into a professional team or to senior national team, depending on what country you're in. So you were the one who kind of proposed this idea. What did you have as a starting point for this?
I think you almost touched on it already. It's the different pathways or the different structures that we see from the different parts of the world about what junior and senior volleyball is. My experience in Australia and in Europe is very much that Australia is different. In Australia, you basically would start volleyball in high school at around 13. And we have no real professional league. So if you want to continue with volleyball seriously after you finish high school, you have to go somewhere outside of Australia. So usually Canada is pretty popular with the boys. And in some cases, guys come to Europe and try and play as a professional. So the window there, the build-up time is quite short. Whereas in Europe, it's more likely, and there's different situations in Europe, as a young player, you play in your local club from 6 years old sometimes. There's a group of girls that are at a club near me who I'm coaching, and the first introduction, they said, hi, this is my name, I'm 15 years old and I've been playing volleyball for 10 years. At which point I said, well, at 15, I didn't know what volleyball was, so you're ahead of me. But you can play with your local club from junior all the way through to national leagues. Or you may be in bigger volleyball leagues or countries with bigger leagues like Italy or Poland or Russia. The structure is a bit closer to football, where you'll have an academy run by a club. And if you're a talent in the region, you'll start heading there. So the variations on the lead-in time that people have, the cultural expectation or the cultural concept of success. So in Australia, if you get out, you're a success, no matter where you play. In Europe, it may be if you play in the National League, you're a success. In some countries, if you're not playing really successfully at a very high level, then maybe that's your measure of success.
Right.
So that's some of the things here, and the different endpoints or perception of endpoint for juniors and where they're heading. Like you said, in the US, where college is generally the goal, and then you have the balance of physical development. With females, an 18-year-old female, is a lot closer to physical maturity than an 18-year-old male.
Mm-hmm.
So that window and that run-in time changes. So you can have guys who are at 22 and playing their last college season, and they're only just really starting to physically mature. So,
right. And the thing I would say that probably, the Aussie structure, the US structure, maybe to a degree the Canadian structure, but I'm not really sure, versus the structure in a lot of other places, Europe obviously being a prime example, is that in the US especially, you do not have a lot of mixture between junior players and adult players. It's very infrequent. Both in terms of the teams, a junior player being on what you would consider an adult team, or the teams playing against each other, juniors playing against adults. I did it once with a U18 team playing in an adult regional tournament years ago. And it was an eye-opening experience for those girls, let me tell you.
Yeah.
It was, they were taller and more athletic, generally speaking, but they got their butts kicked by what they call the old ladies. Because, hey, the old ladies are smart.
They play the game.
Yeah, exactly. They know where you're going to hit the ball. and they know where you're not going to get the ball if they put it there. So yeah, it was something. But in Europe and places with that structure, you get 15 and 16-year-old kids getting mixed into older teams. Maybe not right away, unless they're really, really top talents. But, some exposure along the way in the case of a lot of clubs to kind of work them up toward that sort of thing once they get a little bit older.
Yeah. And one of the real challenges as a coach or a club making these decisions is there's some people who it's obvious that they will be good enough, that it's just a matter of time until they're ready to go play at a high level, or a high level relative to where they are. But it's those guys who are in between. And I use guys as gender neutral, that there's some people who they're capable of being there, but how they go and whether it's just a step on the way is unknown. This is the hardest / most frustrating / most unpredictable part of the process, where the 15-year-old boy who's 195 and touches 3.40 meters, and there's not a lot of them, but the big kids generally who are more physically mature can fit in. It's the kids who are still growing or are new to the sport, or a whole raft of reasons. That middle ground is the trickiest part, and that's probably a bit of the meat of what we want to sort of touch on today.
Sure. Yeah, and one of the things that I hear over here in the States a lot about that whole idea of mixing older and younger players, whether we're talking high school age kids with adult players or more adult players, probably early 20s type situation, or when you're talking about a 14-year-old playing on a 16-year-old team, is the social aspect of it, the socialization aspect. And I don't think that kid should be around these older kids or these adults and what they talk about and all that sort of. Personally, I don't think it's as big a deal as people are afraid that it would be, because I think you tend to discredit the maturity of the older ones in dealing with the younger ones. Yeah. Obviously, not all cases this is true.
Yes.
Any sense of, from your experience, how do those sorts of things play out?
There is a bit of a gender line on this one, that the social element with females tends to be a little bit stronger. I'm not saying it's black and white, but the social interaction between females tends to have a stronger factor in their involvement or enjoyment of the sport. With males, if you go, and this is a massive generalization, but if you go and you play hard and you can physically contribute to the team winning, then that's a barrier of social involvement that's passed a bit easier. And those are broad statements. Also, it depends on the group. You can have a group who are really inclusive and are really open to someone to come and play and be part of their team. I haven't found too many groups where people are trying to exclude someone on the basis of they're not part of the group, but it happens in some ways. The bigger challenge, and I found this is more to do with motivation at the top end, is when you have junior players, and that's under 18s, and adult players in the same team. And then there are some obvious social limitations. The team wins and they want to go to a bar. Well, we've got two 16-year-olds, they can't go.
Right, yeah.
And I've had to have rules in my teams in the past where there's no jobs for the young guys. There's no, the young guys pack up the net, or the young guys, everyone's in it together. And sometimes it's just to make it explicitly clear that it's level. The social element is definitely part of making that decision relative to each individual, but I think also the coach can add some guidelines that help that structure and make it a little bit smoother. And any kid is different from any other kid, so you have to know them and whether it's right to put them in a specific situation. Like in Australia, that question of are you a junior playing with seniors is very much, are you under 18 playing with grown adults?
Mm-hmm.
In Europe, it's more of they can play up an age group or two. Sometimes they have to because they're very small clubs, and
Right. Yep.
we need 7 guys, so we'll take the 12-year-old and put him with the 15-year-olds. And
Yeah. And boys volleyball in the States, you do see that quite a bit, because unlike girls, and even obviously with girls in regional places where you don't have a huge population base, you still have that sort of issue. But it's more prevalent in the boys scene because it's not as big a sport. It's growing, but it's not as big a sport. So you sometimes look at a roster and go, well, that kid looks like he's 12 and that kid looks like he's 18. Yeah. Now, of course, part of that's just what phase of physical maturity they're in, especially with the boys. It can be all over the place within a few years of age difference. But it's almost comical. It's like, how are they on the same team together?
Yeah. And this is probably one of those things with junior sports, but particularly junior volleyball, is as proud as people can be of the success of their teams, there's a bit of a lottery about who you get at what time. And like there's a reason why some coaches are consistently successful, but sometimes you just get the right kids at the right time, and they're bigger and better and whatever than other people. You still have to put them in a team and get the team to play together.
Right. Yep.
This is a bugbear of mine.
No, I had an exchange on VCT at one point. I think it was VCT, one of the online groups, where this whole sort of thing came up, and it had to do with a drill that a certain very successful high school coach used on a regular basis. And this other coach said, hey, this state championship, he's won 5 straight state championships. He uses this drill, so I'm going to use it. And actually he copped to the fact that, well, I mean, he's got a bunch of D1 players on his team, so he's got studs in his program. So that's probably why he wins all the time. But I'm still going to use this drill. I'm like, wait a minute, you just contradicted yourself. Yeah. You just said the reason he wins is because of the athletes he's got, not because of that drill that you think he's using all the time. So it's like, okay, understand what's driving performance.
Absolutely. The young girls that I'm coaching here are probably, because it's fresh in my mind, but we are probably the smallest team in terms of height in the competition. Mm-hmm. But as long as we're trying to play the right way and do the right things, then I'm happy. And so far that's been pretty successful. The season's only a couple of games in, but this idea of how you play and what you're trying to do is more important than wins and losses, and that you're getting players ready to become senior athletes. And this probably segues nicely into the next part of technical development and the point of technical development, and teaching players how to play the game, which is a big thing, rather than teaching them a specific system and saying this is the only way to play.
Right.
Because for me, the goal with coaching juniors is to make them feel like they have control over their actions, and that they have solutions to problems, and that they're not playing to avoid making mistakes.
Okay.
That they can play the game.
Right. I see debates about this stuff, and the approach that juniors coaches should be taking with their groups. On the one hand, there's kind of the debate of, should you be coaching this group for the next level, whatever the next level might be? I mean, if it's 12 and unders, what is it for 14 and unders in high school to go to college? And that's kind of a bigger transition that we're dealing with. There's also the other side of an argument of Do you have to train them 3 contacts versus, especially at the younger age groups, where their default is we want to win, so we know putting the ball over first contact is probably the best way to do it. I've heard very experienced coaches say on both sides, say, no, we want to teach them quote unquote proper volleyball. And other coaches go, no, let them do whatever, because then if they're facing that as players, then they learn more readiness, they learn more awareness and reading to the extent that you might call it reading. I mean, it is really, if you think about it. It's just, you might not associate reading with a 12-year-old.
I stand on the ground of the little girl in the taco ad. Why not both? I don't speak Spanish. I can't tell you what it is in Spanish, but a lot of what I do at practice is trying to set up situations where they have to use both. Here is a situation, usually in small games are great, where you've only got 2 touches. So you have to find a way to get the best attack out of 2 touches. So you're working on ball control and readiness and trying to control the play, but then also you say, now we work on 6-on-6 or work on stuff where we have to use 3 touches and we have trying to get the ball over here to practice this.
Right.
Because if you look at the senior level, the direction the game is heading is a lot more fluid than receive to setter sets and attacker attacks with a strong attack in a certain direction. It's the game is a bit more fluid and players that can play the game and rather than follow the rules are the ones who are being successful.
Would you be referring to somebody like Ingapeth here?
Yeah.
I mean, he's kind of the classic example of not following the rules, quote unquote.
Yeah, well, he's a really good example of why not. He has some very pragmatic solutions. But if you look at the way a team like Zaksa Kazhezhen are playing this season.
That's in Poland for those who
yes.
don't catch that.
Don't try and spell Kazhezhen. It's Zaksa the easy way. But the way that they're playing is a lot of pushes and throws, and if the ball is able to be set on the first contact, that people are ready to attack. And this, because the game has moved in such a way at the top level or at a well-organized level, that scouting and preparation means that you have a reasonable idea what teams are going to do, really breaks that right open. So this is also the idea that I've been working with juniors here and in Switzerland in the last couple of years is you need to feel like you can use your skills. And if you see an opportunity, be ready to take it. We have some base system that we're going to use, that we want to get the ball to the setter and the setter can play. But if you see an opportunity to do something that's going to get us a point, then everyone needs to feel like they have control in that situation to try and execute those things.
Yeah, I've definitely seen many situations where I'll watch teams play and there'll be a clear opportunity to hit the second ball, to attack the second ball, probably with no block, full force, just because of where the ball got passed or dug or whatever.
But
and they set it. And you go, why are you guys locked into 3 contacts? Why do you feel like you have to do it the quote unquote right way? There's no, the right way gets you the point. That's what it is.
Yeah. And the idea of known knowns and known unknowns and unknown unknowns. I like the idea better than the person who said it, but like these girls that I'm coaching, setter takes the first ball and they run first tempo with a non-setter in transition. If I tried to get a senior men's team to do that, that's really hard. But because these girls don't know that it's hard or they don't think that it's difficult because they haven't been told that it's hard, they do it.
And they think it's the coolest thing in the world.
Yeah, it's fun. Or that if we get absolutely messed up, that everyone becomes an attacker. And ideas that at the top level seem revolutionary and different, but kids do them. because they
Right.
just play. And trying to find how to capture this and control it enough and put some structure around it. This is the challenge of coaching juniors to become seniors. How do you get them organized? How do you give them control over their skills without crushing that?
Well, and one of the problems we face is what you kind of just alluded to is once you get to the top level, those guys are and women are extremely specialized. It's the system is almost such that it requires a very high degree of specialization to be a properly elite player.
Yeah.
You know, so as much as we all like the idea of teach the kids to do everything, give them all the skills. And to a degree, it certainly plays into any match that you watch. There are funky situations where somebody who's not a traditional setter has to set the ball, or somebody who's not the ideal hitter has to hit the ball.
Yeah.
If your team can do that, then you've got an advantage against teams that can't, because now they have to decide what to do about it. But yeah, you know, like in the men's game right now, opposites. They do two things. They hit and block, and that's basically all they're expected to do. They're not really even expected to play defense all that much, let's be honest.
Unless they bring their defense shoes to the gym that day.
Right.
But you'll see, so if you watch the European juniors, there are multiple teams where the opposite is in reception in set of 1, set of 5.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, let's go with those. No, set of 1 and set of 4.
1 and 4.
Yeah. Where the opposite has to be a capable enough receiver, because serving there's enough guys who are hitting heavy jump serves.
Yep.
That it's a solution to make it easier for receivers if you have an opposite who can receive 1 meter of the court.
Mm-hmm.
And so developing players and this is why Zaxa has been great this season. They're not the only team that's doing it, but they're really flexible. They've got guys who can do multiple things, and they still are specialized. So they still have an opposite who's an opposite, and they still have a setter who's just a setter.
Yep.
But that they have guys who can do a lot of stuff. And that's probably, it used to be the very elite were the guys who were just super physically and technically capable. And I think that group will now expand to be guys who are very good physically and technically, but also can play the game a little bit better. So it opens that window a little bit more. And yeah, this idea that players need to specialize, I agree with but the specificity of specialization that you end up with players really locked into one idea. So you have opposites who come into the gym going, I only need to serve and block and attack. Rather than saying, actually, no, you need to be able to receive. So you better be ready to receive at practice.
Right.
And changing the idea of what their role is. Because, without wanting to make a too bold a statement, I think the age of specialization has reached a point where chaos can upset it. The best example from my experience, in Australia, we take our youth and junior teams to Thailand to play a tournament. And for a lot of guys, it's their first time playing outside of Australia and playing against different types of volleyball. Because you go to school tournaments, junior tournaments in Australia, everyone's playing more or less the same. And then you go and play against teams who line up with in Australia, we'd call the Korean rotation. So middle next to the setter rather than receiver next to the setter. They run a lot of combination plays. And for guys who've only ever played volleyball one way, just about what's going on the other side of the net.
Right.
So it's this concept changes. And I think, and setters seem to have this in their head, particularly the really good ones of I can move pieces around and this is an option. And I have all these tools. I need people on the other end
Mhm.
to be able to use them. So as a step for juniors to seniors, it's like I said before, you need to develop as many technical skills as you can, and at some point you will need to specialize in something. But the role that's defined as I'm an opposite has to change. That's the big jump there. Or I'm a setter, I never need to hit. I'm like, well, you don't want your setter needing to hit an overpass on match point when they haven't hit a ball in 6 months. So,
Right. Yeah, exactly.
So little things like that. Just it's not a radical change, but that the definitions become a little bit broader. So this is on a technical sort of concept that specialization is not bad, specialization is not wrong, but that what we are specializing players to do, particularly as they're still developing, this is the question. They need to fit in with a system. They need to fit in with, particularly if you want them to be pros, or even with college teams, that there's different systems and different styles.
Yep.
But that don't lock off doors before they need to be shut.
Yeah, that's one of the real issues of you've got a coach who, at least in their own mind, whether this is reality or not, believes that they have to win. That's therefore I need to win. That means I need to put my best players on the court in whatever position I think they're best suited to in this group of players, which for the development of certain players can be problematic. You know, one of the things that I saw a lot in Texas, and volleyball is massive in Texas, but like we said, you have situations where you have a small high school, they don't have a lot of numbers to pick from. So whoever happens to be the taller, more athletic kid gets stuck in the middle. That kid who is, 5'9", probably has no prospects of playing middle in college at a higher level, maybe at a lower level.
Yeah.
But you look at them and you go, athletically, the kid can jump out of the gym and can do all these other things. It could be a pin hitter, or something else, anything else for that matter. But because all they've done is train for 4 years as a middle, they see themselves as a middle. Their coach sees them as a middle. God forbid they actually get to pass and play defense and things like that. Because I mean, I've got a kid on the team right now who told me when I talked with her, she's an incoming freshman, saying I never really played defense or anything like that. And I was going, well, that's about to change.
Yeah. And this is the argument against extreme specialization, that I've done some work with female college players who have come to Europe, and after 4 years at really big successful schools, that they're like, how do I receive? Like, someone spent $100,000 on your education because you can play volleyball, and you never had to do most of the part of playing volleyball.
Yeah.
So,
the two big things is you've got outside hitters who only played front row.
Yep.
And you've got middles who never served.
Yep.
Those are kind of the two primary transition points. And when I was at Svetala and we were recruiting players for my team that year, and I'm looking at outside hitters going, if I don't see any indication that you played defense and received serve for 4 years in college, I can't take you. I can't take the chance when I've only got 3 players allowed.
Yeah.
That you can't receive serve, because you have to receive serve. I can't take you out.
Absolutely. And this is where that, and I don't like the phrase pathway, because anyone who's playing volleyball who is young and wants to get better is on the pathway. They don't even have to be that young. But from a national federation perspective, if you're a junior player, where the relative perception of success. But if you're in America, your goal is get to college, get a scholarship, and that's probably your end point for a lot of
or the majority
of players.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. In Europe, particularly if you're starting at a high point, if you're a junior in a Polish club academy, that your goal is that I'm going to play Plusliga. I'm going to play in one of the best leagues in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And then if you really want to do it, maybe you need to go somewhere else to make that happen and work your way up. But if you're a junior, so the situation that I had in Lucerne, when I left, we had 3 or 4 of my talent school boys had worked their way up to the National League A level. And that's where it becomes exactly what you were talking about of it's my job to win. Like my employment is tied to success of the team. But also my other half of my job is to help these guys get better. So how do I, where the rubber meets the road of I have these 17-year-olds or 18-year-olds or around that age who are physically capable. We've developed technically enough and they understand what we're trying to do enough, but they need to play with guys who are professionals, guys who have been playing at the level for multiple years, in a team that needs to win for a coach who wants to keep his job. And that's where it's really tough. And this is the hardest part in Europe, at least, for the guys who aren't guaranteed superstars. So the guys who aren't a walk-up start for your top teams, the guys who are maybe a little bit smaller or maybe not super athletic or are still growing and developing, how do you get those guys ready to go and find them opportunities? It's not something that I've always been great at because of the aforementioned, I want to keep my job.
Yeah.
But this is the hardest part of, is it better that they're practicing with me full time and doing all this stuff, but not playing a lot? Or is it better that maybe they're training less and playing a lot more?
Yeah, that's a question you get from a lot of high school coaches with regards to the whole varsity, junior varsity thing. I've got a kid who's good enough to train with the varsity, but probably won't get much in the way of playing time. But if they're with the junior varsity, they'll play all the time.
Yeah.
Depending on what the philosophy is there. So what do I do with this kid? Do I bring them up? Do I keep them down? Do I try to do some within the rules, whatever the rules might dictate? Do I try to swing them back and forth a bit? It's not an easy decision. I don't envy coaches in that situation.
And it's the situation that determines it. If your JV coach is not that good or isn't following the same structure of the varsity coach, or like we had in my region, we had an NLA team. We had no NLB team in the region, so not even part of our club or another club. And then the first league, which is the third league, we had 5 teams in the region where the guys could travel reasonably easily to be a part of. So then it becomes a question of, are they going to play at the level that they're going to get better at? Are they going to practice in a way that they're getting better? And you have to weigh those things up, because in a perfect world, yeah, there's always a second team where they can go and play and the level's all right and they're getting good coaching and the teammates are supportive, but that doesn't always happen.
Since we're on this topic, let's talk a little bit about parents. I know here in the States it's a big deal. It's a huge talking point in coaching, because we can talk about these situations. Hey, we think developmentally it's best for the kid to be on the varsity team but not play. And you can have these conversations at the beginning of the season saying, hey, listen, this is what it's going to look like. And everybody can go, yeah, okay, we understand. But then you get halfway through the season and the kid hasn't played at all or barely played at all. And now, actually, it's usually the case that I think the kid is usually all right with it. They kind of understand because they're in it every day. But the parents start losing their minds because why is Johnny or Jenny not playing? And they've obviously got parent goggles on at that point.
Yeah. Parents are there's no one solution there, unfortunately. I know some teams have a rule that parents don't talk to the coach. I'm not sure I'm a fan of that. I think the coach needs to be accountable. But there's also, I think, like what you said, they're not there every day. And you get some mixture of parents who've played and parents who haven't played and parents who want to be there to watch the games and parents who are happy for the kids to just go and be part of the team.
Right.
It's, I think the best you can do is be honest and say this is what the plan is, but know that plans change. And to say that it's an ongoing discussion, but it's just a discussion. And that the decision that we all agreed on is something we all agree on. We can talk about what that means as it goes on, but you don't have to change your mind as a coach. And that's hard. You need good people around to support you with that stuff. Unfortunately, for a lot of, well, almost all juniors, the parents are the sponsors of the team. So they're spending money, no matter how much it is, and they expect something in return.
Right. Especially in a junior's case when there's a tuition of some sort. You can argue that in high school situation where generally speaking the parents aren't paying anything aside from taxes to feed the school system. Their influence shouldn't be, but they don't necessarily agree with that. I mean, to your point about interaction with the coaches, my personal feeling is I gain a lot of information from the parents. If I'm having regular communication with them informally between matches or whatever, I can hear stuff that I'm not going to hear about otherwise. So I know that, there's an issue in the family. So Susie isn't going to be kind of at her full potential for a little while here. And I'm not reacting to something ignorant of the fact, and just the flip side as well.
I have the other flip side of, I've been having to have some of these conversations in countries where we have limited command of shared languages. So there's times where maybe there was a misunderstanding or we understood each other, but it wasn't perfectly clear, or that sometimes there's something that needs to be said, but there's not the confidence to say it. I'm kind of interested in what role club volleyball in the US plays, because it's an industry, and that really people are there as a preparation for
college. Exactly. And that's exactly what it is. And that's actually one of the questions going on right now, given that a lot of the restrictions that we see happening and the moving of seasons and all this in response to COVID is happening at the school level. And clubs, for the most part, don't seem to be under the same set of restrictions and considerations. Now, so that creates opportunities for the clubs in a certain way, so that a lot of them are doing things. If there's no high school season going on right now in their particular state or county or whatever it is, a lot of clubs are filling that void right now with some sort of programming. Now, of course, the ones that are relying on schools for the facilities, that's a problem. If they don't have their own facilities, then they're struggling, because a lot of the institutions won't allow outside groups in anymore at this point, which is likely to change the whole landscape of things moving forward. And there's already the feeling that club has increasingly, because of the college preparation scholarship sort of thing, has become much more dominant. And I think the numbers are still pretty small, but you do see an increasing number of kids forego high school altogether, just so they can train a little bit more with their juniors group, individual trainings or small group trainings or whatever that is, because they see the high school levels being significantly lower and thus not preparatory. Now, I think you and I might argue that there are elements of being in a team that you get from being in a team that doesn't necessarily have a lot to do with the level of play, but that's something you balance out one way or the other.
It's really where the structures around junior volleyball change drastically. That you can be 18, 19, 20 in Europe and still be a developing player.
Right.
But in the US, you need to be pretty close to your finished product at that age. So the pressures on where you're at with development and what, as a coach, what you're teaching players or getting them ready to do, it changed drastically. I know that if I have a 16-year-old as a particularly 16-year-old boys, I have a lot more experience with boys. If I have a 16-year-old boy in my squad or in my talent team or talent school, that I've probably got 3-4 years before I can expect too much from them in terms of senior performance. But if I have a 16-year-old girl in the US, I might have 18 months before it's going to be a pretty big decision by someone as to what happens with her future.
Right. Well, and I want to transition for this last phase. I want to transition us kind of to the other side of the equation of if we're a senior coach and we're bringing these players into our teams, how are we helping them adapt? And I want to just like context this a little bit from the college perspective, where one of the issues you've got at the college level just is kind of related to what you were just talking about in terms of there being further developmental teams after 18 in other places where you're going to have limited squads. You might only have 10 or 12 and you're going to be able to get playing time in there. Whereas in the college system, you might have teams of 20.
Yeah.
Only 6 can get on the floor at any given time. So a lot of the team is not going to get sufficient playing time, or not, maybe not sufficient isn't the right word, but significant to be sure. And how that plays into their development and the other aspects of just being part of a team sport is, obviously the engagement and the involvement, depending on the culture of the situation. So we have that complexity of not only saying, okay, we've got this 18-year-old who's a freshman, just came into the team. How do we help them transition from the level of high school and juniors to the college level? And also, how do we look at going, okay, we've got this massive team. We have to we don't have a junior varsity team for the most part. There are some colleges that do, where we can get them playing time if they're not getting it in the first team. The thing that I've listened to a lot of conversations of high school age kids, junior age kids talking to college kids and going, what's the biggest difference? And it's almost always speed of the game. Yep. It's almost always the very first thing. So what do we do to help that transition along?
Play fast. Yeah, I think this is reasonably universal. The jump from juniors to seniors is almost always the game is bigger, higher, faster. The skill level is normally better, but not always drastically better. So the best example I can use is the Australian men's national team. We can compete with the best teams in the world. We are physically and technically capable of playing at a very good level. Can we do it fast enough? Can we do it consistently enough? Do we have the guys that can compete at that level all the time? And when you see clubs like my old club, we play in European competition. We played last year in Challenge Cup against Montpellier from France, who at that point was second in Pro A, which is one of the better leagues in Europe. And we were competitive most of the time. The gap is not that big, but the gap is also huge, which is not a helpful statement. But physically, technically, you're probably pretty close. But that last step of being comfortable in that situation and feeling like you have the tools and the understanding of the game to go a little bit faster or to be a little bit more aware of what's happening on the court is a big step. So for me, that's the idea of, can you get players who feel like they have control of their actions technically, but also know where to look and have some experience playing against different things, not necessarily just fast, but some different things that they're seeing how the game unfolds and how to read setters and how to see where hitters are moving to and who's in and out of the play. That makes that step easier. Because if you're just taught, you stand here, you go do this, then when that changes or you don't have the time that you used to have, you don't necessarily have the tools to make that last step. What am I seeing earlier that gives me more time that I don't need to physically improve so much that I can be there? And for me, with the juniors that I work with, this is a lot of what did we see is a question I ask so much. Like what did you see happening on the other side of the net? Were you in a position where you could react to that, or where you felt like you had control over your action that followed that? These are, for me, the two things. Once you have that stuff, you can plug people into a system or against the system, and it becomes a lot easier to adapt. But for me, those are the two key things, that players feel like they have control and technical solutions to problems, and that they know where to look and what information is happening on the other side of the net, which also makes them more coachable when you have game plans and scouting that they're used to saying, I'm looking for this. So if you're looking for someone to get ready for college, teach them what to look at on the other side of the net, because coaches love players who see what's coming.
Absolutely. When I was coaching at Midwestern, I think after our second season, I had a conversation with the players and I asked them, I was like, do you guys think you're physically equal to any team in the conference? We had finished, I think it was 7-13 that year, which was a significant improvement over where they were 2 years prior when they didn't win a single match in conference. And they were like, yeah, no doubt. I mean, size-wise, they were equivalent. Athleticism-wise, they were equivalent. Were there one or two players in the league that you would say, okay, yeah, they're just physically better? All right, maybe, sure, that's going to happen in any league. But the difference definitely was they did not play volleyball as well as the other teams. They were capable of doing it on a physical basis, but they hadn't learned the decision-making, the reading, some of the solutions, as you mentioned, that, they needed to learn. And whether it was because they had come from more rigid structures, or they'd never been taught the things to look at yet, or just to play a little bit more freely and not be constrained like, okay, I'm on defense, I have to stand here. And that's...
And we talk a lot about people being coachable. Coachable isn't necessarily an athlete does what you tell them because you tell them to do it. It's because that they can do it. They understand why they're doing it. And they can see the situation occur where it's useful to be doing that. So it's not just the coach told me to do this, so I do it. But when you have an athlete you can talk to, and they can use that information, that makes them really coachable, and then they're great. But rather than just saying they can't do it, the part about scouting with young players that I've coached, and I try and keep my scouting and prep sessions reasonably short and simple. But part of that barrier is I don't want to take the risk of making a mistake because it's hard. So like I've had games where this guy, we don't want to serve the ball at him. The other team is much better when he's not receiving the ball.
Right.
But you have guys who are like, I don't feel comfortable serving to one. Like that's not a strong serve for me, but I don't want to do the other thing because I've been told not to do it. So that becomes a technical challenge.
Yeah.
And you have other times where guys will say, I want to do the right thing, but maybe I don't remember what it is, or I don't understand why, or I don't feel confident doing it. And these are things you can develop with young players when you start saying, hey, we're going to go out and look for this set.
Right.
And all of a sudden, okay, well now we can look for that, but do we see this as well? And then when you try and transfer that into off-court situations with video and scouting, this is also development for players, that the people who see these things, and if they can see the transition between video on the court, helps them grow and helps them become more coachable, which makes coaches happy, and hopefully we win games and people think we're great. and life is good. But this is the part of decision making and athletes feeling like they have control.
Yeah, the one of the interesting things for me is when I come across coaches who get frustrated when their teams ask them why.
Yeah.
Why do they ask me why? Why don't they just do it? And to be fair to some of them, it's like a breaking point sort of thing. They're okay with it for a while, but then it just like, they just do it. And okay, yeah, there's a certain point where the kids can ask too many questions. Like, okay, we need to do this. We just need to go out and do this, and you'll understand, when we're on the court.
When you do it, it'll make sense.
But we also, as coaches, we can't restrict the kids from asking why. I mean, it's never bothered me because I'm probably that person. I want to know the why.
Yeah.
So I might not have always been the one to ask it, but I was always trying to think through, okay, why we're doing this. Others, and I know there's certain players that just go tell me what to do.
Yeah.
And that might be, and a lot of people think of that kid as coachable because they'll do what you say.
Yeah.
The problem is they'll probably only do what you say.
Some of them, yeah. Some people really want that explicit instruction, and that's not bad. Particularly because if they're capable of doing it, that's fine. But everyone's different learners. Everyone's at different stages. Also, asking questions of players is a great way, or as a coach, to ask the players questions is a great way to find out what they don't know and what you should be teaching them.
Right. Yeah. I had a girl, the first juniors team I coached, it was 16 and unders. She was having some problems with her control when she was swinging full speed. So in practice one day, I said, why don't you just back it down a little bit? And you'll be a little bit more successful at this point. And I didn't really think much, but she did it. And so she was doing better. And then, a few weeks later, I'm like, why aren't you hitting hard? Well, she stayed there. And, she didn't understand that I was thinking temporary. She was thinking permanent.
It's the answer. Yeah.
Ooh, yeah, exactly. Yeah. And that's why you need that dialogue, because you don't know. You may think you're communicating things to them, and you think they're receiving the thing that you're trying to teach them.
Yeah.
But then that's not always the case. It's going through their own filters.
And this is the silver lining of working in a country where I don't speak the native language. I always have to ask, do we understand? Is there any questions? Yeah. And that's become a habit for me.
Yeah.
But the benefit of this is I find out what I don't explain well, and I find out what my players don't understand and what they don't know. And if your coach is ever wondering, what do we need to practice? What should I do in the next week of practice or the next month? Ask your players. Don't ask them explicitly, because then you'll get, we're just going to play bugger for 6 hours in the next week. Or we're just going to hit meter balls if they're boys. But ask them about situations in the game and see what they know and they don't know, and watch your games, videotape your games and see what you can see. Try and keep some sort of basic statistics or something. The information's there, but you don't need any resources to ask players a question and to listen. That's probably the better point. If you ask a question, listen to the answer.
Yeah, exactly. All right. I think we can leave it right there. That's a good way to finish it.